Dave, Jay, and Sam on the Talk of the Town, and a special guest on line one from the DMV in Albany. It's the Director of Investigations for the DMV, Owen McShane. Owen, welcome to the show.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
Doing okay. How long have you been at the DMV?
I've worked here for 24 years. I started as an entry-level investigator and worked my way up.
Well, it's an interesting story we're about to get into here. But before we get to that, we were talking earlier about the DMV itself and, you know, how some people associate the DMV with the long lines and things like that. We were all talking about there are certain DMV outlets here in the Mohawk Valley and in central New York that have shorter lines than normal. And, you know, things are being streamlined a little more these days with regard to technology at the DMV. What's it like working there?
It's constantly changing. We're trying to get customers in and out faster and make sure that their experience is as pleasant as it can be while visiting the DMV. And the feedback's actually been very positive.
Owen, as an investigator, we were talking before we had you on. It must be an interesting type of job, kind of intricate, and you're also, investigating within the DMV. Can you tell us maybe a few, stories or what's your day-to-day like?
Sure. I started working for DMV in the New York City region and worked primarily in auto theft for 10 years. And the last 15 years I've spent in Albany. And we've seen our changing duties from a lot of focus on auto theft to identity theft and fraudulent documents. And identity theft is currently the #1 consumer crime. So we're trying to deal with it to help protect people's records.
I noticed that, you talk about that, and it has seemed that as, the switch or the focus has turned to more of that, the paperwork end of it, the identity, the within the DMV, if you will, some of the, the fraudulent IDs that are obtained and paperwork and registrations. Is that more of the focus or the idea?
It's auto theft still a focus, but the main focus right now is the identity theft and making sure the person we have in front of us has one ID, one record, and we hold that person accountable for whatever they have on that record.
And I think that leads us to, our story we're talking about today.
Well, actually, before we get there, Jay, I'd like to know what your opinion is, Owen, about how people can protect themselves against identity theft. What are your suggestions for that?
My suggestion is just be careful where you're putting your information and how you're distributing it. One of the biggest areas we've seen in the last few years is counterfeit IDs. And traditionally, counterfeit IDs have been college students or high school students who want to get into a bar, buy tobacco, whatever the reason is, they get a fake ID. And in the past, fake IDs were standing in front of a poster and having a picture taken and a license created. Now it's placing an order online, ordering a document, and what we're seeing is these high school kids, college students, submitting all their personal information in order to get a fake ID. Some of these counterfeit websites are asking for your real name, your real date of birth, your real social security number, and we have young individuals providing that. They get their fake ID in the mail 4 weeks later or 6 weeks later, but then 6 months later they find out someone purchased a car in their identity or someone purchased a house in their identity. So it's kind of scary, as some of the web transactions are being done in other countries and all the way around the world. Their personal information is being sold and resold.
Some of the measures that the DMV has in place to combat, some of these fraudulent IDs and, some of the businesses or companies that produce them.
Well, one of the things we require is a social security number for anyone to obtain a driver's license, and we validate that and verify that with Social Security while you're in the office to make sure it's your social security number and it belongs to your name, date of birth, and sex. And over the years, we've had people walk into DMV to obtain a license and found out someone's already used their social security number, someone's registered a car in their name. So protecting that information is really important.
Talking to Owen McShane, Director of Investigations for the DMV. And actually, Owen, we're looking at our 2 New York State driver's licenses right now, mine and Jay's, and we have different versions. Jay, yours appears to be sort of beaten up and old. I have the newer version that has the hologram picture of myself on it. What's that being used for?
We updated our driver's license version in 2013. The newer version that you see is actually made out of a new material that's very difficult to counterfeit. We have not seen anyone successfully counterfeit it. and all the information is actually burnt into the document with a laser. So you'll see a black and white photo on it. It's actually burnt in. There's no ink on that document. It's all burned in with lasers.
So you're saying that you haven't seen anyone able to counterfeit this. So what you've talked about, a lot of the online transactions, are they IDs from other states?
Yes, and what we do is we have our investigators participate with local law enforcement with underage drinking, bar checks, verification, just to see what's out there and what people are capable of counterfeiting. We recover thousands of counterfeit licenses a year, and it's a guide to us on what they can counterfeit and what they can't counterfeit.
All right, the headline we're reading about, the DMV busting suspected fraudster trio using facial recognition. Explain a little bit about that process, Owen.
Sure. At the DMV, we have 11.5 million drivers, and we have 1.2 million individuals with non-driver IDs. And as I said earlier, our goal is to make sure we have one driver, one record. And in 2008, we looked at using facial recognition, and we actually did a pilot from using the thruway corridor from Albany to Syracuse, enrolled individuals in facial recognition, and we had identified 67 individuals with 2 or more licenses. Some of them, traffic safety issues. We identified some fugitives. We identified some people you don't want driving behind you on the highway. Mm-hmm. And the pilot was so successful, we rolled it out statewide in 2010. And now when you walk into DMV, it does and you obtain a driver's license or renew a driver's license, it takes your new photo and compares it to any other old photos on file to make sure you're the same person. And it also compares it to all the other photos on file to make sure you do not have a record already in DMV.
And now, where does your jurisdiction end, and does the FBI or do other law enforcement agencies get involved in situations like the one we're reading about right here, where there were a trio of fraudsters that were busted?
Well, all our investigators are peace officers. They have arrest authority, and we make a lot of the arrest ourselves. We work closely with local, state, and federal law enforcement, and it depends on the scenario that we're dealing with. In some of the cases, we find these individuals, the 3 that you're talking about, had licenses in both New York and New Jersey. They were licensed under one name and date of birth in New York and a different name, date of birth in New Jersey. They were hiding DWI convictions, splitting tickets, and committing other types of fraud.
We're also hearing that facial recognition that was used in this particular crime also will be pioneered in airports and things like that. Are you aware of that?
Yes. Different airports are looking at it, try to speed up the process. Some of the programs, such as Clear, that you can provide your information in advance, airports are looking at that as combining facial recognition just to speed up some of those lines.
Owen, Director of Investigations with the New York State DMV, Owen McShane. Something interesting I'm seeing here is you're saying that one single digitized photograph can be used in this database with many different photographs of this, of a suspect. Is that correct?
Correct. We take the one photo and we compare it against all the other photos on file, and it just doesn't match based on measurements between key points. So we've had people try to hide their identity by growing a beard,
Sure,
wearing glasses, covering their heads with a hat, and the system's still matching them.
Wow, I think that's really key and instrumental to this because, we've seen this here in, many different, cases, whether it be, I know that I'm thinking of a case of a murder suspect who, his picture was put out on the news in many different media outlets, and when they eventually found the suspect, he looked completely different from the photos that were being shown to the public. So,
well, one of the first cases we had was an individual who we matched with 2 licenses. And when we looked at the 2 records, they were completely different names, dates of birth, Social Security numbers. When we checked the 2 names in law enforcement systems, we found under the one identity, the person had been a fugitive since 1993.
Wow.
He had robbed a bank using a machine gun and fled the country with $450,000. He walked into DMV to renew a driver's license that he'd been using, a new alias he created, and it matched against his old record that was still suspended for unpaid tickets. So 17 years after fleeing the country, he was apprehended with that incident in the Bronx.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's very instrumental.
Very notable. Well, I'm proud to say I do have the new New York State issued license here with the updates that you described, Owen, and Jay needs to change that as soon as possible.
Well, the photos, regardless, old style, new style, facial recognition works for both, and everyone has the same protections. When I mentioned earlier that we check against existing records when you renew your license, we've identified over 200 people who someone tried to steal their identity, and facial recognition prevented that. They went into DMV and tried to renew a license in someone else's name, and the system kicked it back because the photos didn't match.
Great. Well, we're glad to hear the system's working for the DMV, and thanks for your time today, Owen. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.